Thanks for tuning in to this Westwood at Work talk. The concept of these videos is simple. Find people who are living out their faith in their work every day in hopes that you'll be able to find some wisdom for your own work in implementing your faith into your jobs. This last spring at Westwood, we hosted a class called Reframe. And in the class was Eillis. Amber and her family have worshiped at Westwood for the last few years. She's the Associate Product Manager at CanService Corporation. And in the midst of that class, she said something that I will never forget. And she shares the story of that aha that she had and more in this talk. Enjoy. So Amber, let's start by talking about your career thus far. Where have you worked and how have you gotten to the role that you're in today?
Sure. So I've had many jobs throughout my life, but my first big job, I would say, outside of college was at Valspar. And I love Valspar. I worked there in IT. I was a BA. I did some Lean Six Sigma stuff, and then I did some project management work. And I loved it there, and then I got married and had a kid, and all of a sudden the traveling didn't seem so pleasing because we were doing a lot of international projects at the time. So then I think a lot of my life changed when I had my daughter. All of a sudden I couldn't find a place of comfort. You know, every place I went, I had a hard time finding something with work-life balance, and I just struggled for a while. So I kind of hopped around for a little bit. So I was at C.H. Robinson for a bit, Best Buy very briefly, and now I'm at CanService Corporation.
Great. So tell us a little bit about CanService Corporation and what you're doing as an organization, and then also what is your role there and what are you contributing to every day?
Yeah, so CanService, I love what the company's trying to do. They're an agricultural enterprise software is what we're trying to do. As far as agriculture goes, it's an industry where it's low tech until recently, and now things are just blowing up. And it's very exciting. It's a new industry. We're trying to get out there and help the growers do their job better, and it's exciting because every day it's something new. But at the same time, we're a startup, so there's lots of ups and downs and layoffs and changes, and so it's every day is a different. You don't know what you're going to get into. And then my role there, I started in IT. And now I'm in product, which I knew nothing about, and I still am learning, so I've been reading a lot of books about what is a product manager. And I'm kind of in the role of a product owner now. That recently happened a few months ago. So I work with our agile development teams. I come up with the market needs, the requirements, prioritize it, and we try to get our product out. We need to get a product out there and that meets the needs, and so it's sellable so our company succeeds. So
before you came in, and by the way, please text in questions that you have for Amber as we did the last session. Before you went through the Reframe class this last spring, can you describe how you viewed your work? And
Sure.
Based on the view of your work, how did that impact you and influence you every day as you went there?
Yeah, so before the class, I was anxious a lot. I would say anxious was my middle name. I was always stressed and overwhelmed and trying to figure out how am I going to do this job and be a wife and be a mom and balance all that. So I was really struggling. I was really trying to be like, where are my skills? How can I be, good at what I'm trying to do? So I was kind of lost, and I mean, my husband could probably attest. I was kind of crazy for a while, because it was just hard. It's hard to find who I am now, as a mom and a career, and trying to figure out how to use my skills.
So what were some of the learnings in your class, and how did they reframe, that was the name of the course obviously, but how did they reframe the way that you look at your job every day?
Yeah, so the job was, as I said, very stressful because I didn't know what I was doing. And it was a new industry, but this was a cliffhanger. So one day I was like, oh, you know what? What we're trying to do is, I started to meet some of these farmers and growers, and I grew up on a farm too. But I was meeting these big farmers, and they got so much going on, and regulations are attacking them, and the customer base are attacking them, and I'm like, we're trying to not only help them do their job better and faster, so they can spend time with their family, but help them do that traceability of their work, so they can prove that they're being sustainable to the environment, to help them be financially sustainable. So, when you look at what you're really trying to do and look at that big picture every day, it's really helped.
If I remember, this is my paraphrase of your statement that night, and I've
Yeah.
used it in other places, so I'll say it and have you react to it as well. Tell me if I have it wrong, first of all.
Okay.
But then kind of go in a little bit further to it. If I remember you right, I heard you say, I no longer view my job as selling software alone. Now I see it as improving the livelihood of farmers by providing software that can help them improve their machine efficiency. Did I add my own words into that? You have full reign to correct me.
Maybe
but
just a few,
the
but
tenor of that.
But yeah, it was to the point of I'm making their, we need to make their lives easier. Have them collect the data fast, have them get easy ways so they can, reproduce it and give it to the people they need. So they're not doing all this book work in the middle of the night after they work 16 hours already that day. So I mean, you got the gist of it for sure.
Great, great. So for you, kind of a shift in the big picture of what you're doing and why you're doing it. It feels like I hear you talking about, okay, this is a cause. I have a cause behind me now that's new. How has that impacted just the big picture for you about maybe why you go to work, why you press into some of the challenges that are in front of you? How has that affected the big picture for you?
Yeah, so because I'm kind of, same thing with I'm sure everybody. My day starts at 7:30 in the morning with calls with our development team in Russia, and things are going bad at every second, So you come into work and you just start getting hammered, and sometimes you just feel like you're losing sight of it all. And then later on in the day, we start having more calls with the customers, and they're like, wow, that's really going to help me with this aspect of what we need to do, and that just helps you again see the big picture. Like I'm deep down in the weeds a lot, but when you start listening to, oh wow, we are starting to make an impact, or hey, we need to change this so we can make the right impact, it just makes it more exciting and reminds you of the big picture.
Yeah, good. So you talked a bit about, and a question came in about this, the opportunities that you've had to meet these farmers, see their land, be with them, maybe even meet some of their families. Can you talk about, just go in a little bit more into depth about what has getting connected with them meant for you in your job? And how has that, with maybe a little bit more detail, how has that helped you to consider your job as your God-given calling, if you will?
Sure. So, again, I grew up on a farm. So I just remember the days of my dad just killing himself. And then, again, that was back in the 80s. You had the financial crisis on top of everything. But so you grew up knowing how hard it is and how hard these people work. So I think I have a sense of empathy there that maybe some people might not have that come into our business. And then, like you said, so I'm learning new markets too. So I had an opportunity to go down to California to see some of our perennial nut farmers and seeing how they operate. And their scales are 10 times larger than my dad's, small family farm. You're like, how can you manage all that, And you get out there and you meet them, and I drove around in a truck all day long from orchard to orchard and seeing all the problems they're having with the harvest. And they're like, no, this technology won't work because, my person doesn't speak English and he doesn't even know how to use an iPhone. We can't, it's like you get out there and you're like, oh, oops, well, that's not going to work. And so you just really get to know what they're going through and the problems they're having, and you come back and you try to make the right changes.
Do you have some examples of the result of viewing your work differently? Stories maybe perhaps that you've experienced since that time in early spring that we were in this room?
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot more bold at work about just talking about the classes I've taken. So Westwood has awesome classes, not only the work and faith, but I've been taking a lot of the leadership classes, and they're all fantastic and great way to meet people and learn. So a few examples, I talk about the classes a lot. So I come back, I'm like, hey, I'm taking this class at church and we're learning about this, and people get engaged, whether they're Christian or not Christian. They're like, wow, your church does that? That's really neat. I'm like, yeah. And then I just got done taking a leadership class, and they're talking about how important it is to have a vision and mission. And our company, it's a startup, and things are crazy. And we had like probably 5 different missions from the different founders. And I mean, everybody was just going in all different directions. So we got a new CEO that came in. And I mean, I know he already knew how to do a mission and vision, but I walked into his office. I'm like, hey, I'm taking this leadership class, and I know you guys are working on doing this, and here are some really cool slides. And he's like, wow, you're taking that at church? And then I'm like, yeah. And I talked more about how I was on the justice team here and found out he was a justice team member at Wooddale. And he started talking about, he pulled out this pamphlet. He was just at a Christian leadership event, and he's like, everything I bring into this corporation is Christian-based. And that never would have came up, and we wouldn't have had that connection if I wasn't like, well, I'm just going to bring this up and see where it goes. So I think being bold, I've made a lot more connections with people. You can talk more in depth about that stuff. I don't know, and now I felt more at peace now that he's on, so he's been on about a month, knowing that, he has Christian values, and he's going to treat people respectfully, and he takes it he carries around stuff with him about these Christian leadership classes he was at. He pulled it out, so I have faith that he's going to be a fair leader, and it just, I don't know, it was exciting. And I feel a lot more comfortable with how it's going to go.
I like that. I have a picture in my head of you just kind of charging into that office and saying, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we got. That's cool.
With my notebook.
Question came in. You talked earlier about what you wrestled through as a mom and as an employee, as a full-time worker. You talk about balance and having a family. How do you practice that, and why to you is it important?
Yeah, so it's... I don't know, it's extremely important. I'm only going to have one kid, and she's awesome, and I don't want to miss out on her life. At the same time, I do like to work. I think she's actually better at going to her preschool and daycare than what it'd be if I was home with her all day. So I want to be a good role model for her, and at the same time, I don't want to miss out. I want to be home. I want to put her to bed every night, and do a good job during the day. So it's finding that balance and trying to do both well. I found finally at CanService, even though it's crazy with a startup, people have been extremely respectful with my time because I made that very clear. I'm not going to be working all night anymore. I'm just not doing it. And I think that was the other thing the class helped me with, is being more bold and have faith, and just have faith that God and things are going to make things just work out. And it just made me more confident with being more vocal about what I need, and people have been very respectful.
Thank you. That's an important topic right now for a lot of people. You talk about the leadership classes here as well, but a question came in. What other resources have you used as you work to integrate your faith and your work together? Are there any other sources that you're going to, or books, resources, things that you've found helpful?
I would say a lot of my stuff comes from Westwood, to be honest. The other thing that has been really impactful to me is I was trying to find how can I volunteer here that would make an impact too for me. So I joined the justice team, which I think is fantastic, great people on that team. And that's helped me too, be like, just to understand that my job's not the only thing about me. If I lose my job tomorrow, that doesn't define me anymore. I got all these other skills and these other passions, and I just know things are going to work out. So I just learned a lot from the networks I'm in, and being more open to real problems in the world instead of just my meeting that went bad. It just helps kind of open up and have a bigger perspective.
So we talk often about, in this faith and work conversation, doing your everyday work with God. What are some ways that you're reminding yourself about God's presence with you and the purpose that He has for your work on a regular basis, be it every day, every week, every month, what have you?
Mm-hmm. I think that what I've really come to find is I feel like God puts me in all these places to meet people and to work with people. I feel like even though I had this short stint at Best Buy, I was purposely meant to be there to meet two very important people in my life. And I just feel like everything happens for a reason, and I try to treat people as first. I trip up, let me tell you, I apologize a lot throughout my days, but I always try to come back and circle back and be that people's first. A good example was on Friday, I actually brought one of our sales executives, is resigning. It's with startup, there's a lot of politics, and he's kind of getting pushed out. And he kind of just resigned without a job, and he's a great guy, very intelligent, But I brought him out to lunch. I mean, this guy probably makes 3 times more money than I do, but I brought him out to lunch, paid for his lunch, and I was trying to tell him, hey, it's going to work out. Have faith. And I go, what I really want you to do, he has 2 little girls, 4 and 6. I'm like, take this time around the holidays, enjoy your time off with your kids. I'm like, in January, hit it hard. But I'm like, this might be a great opportunity for you to relax, not travel so much, spend time with your family. And I'm like, and it's going to work out. And he's like, do you really think it's going to work out? I'm like, it's definitely going to work out, So.
I think a thread that we could use to sum up your story as it relates to what you're doing is a boldness. That's really bold, and I really like that. Last question for you. What encouragement would you give to someone who was in your place before going through this reframe experience, before you really started deliberatively thinking about the purpose of your work and what God had for you? Let's back up a little bit to Amber before the class.
Okay.
If you were talking to somebody who's in that same place, what would you say to them now?
I think a lot of it, and again, this comes from the class and Pastor Joel, but having faith that things are going to work out. So I used to get anxious about things that were out of my control. I've come to realize, hey, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on, and that's out of my control, and I just move it over there, and I focus on what I have control over. And most of that's putting people first, and every day is a new hurdle, and I just have faith it's going to work out. And I've come at peace, too, that if I did lose my job, I'm okay with it. I'm fine. It'll work out. So.
Well, let's thank Amber together if we could for her time.